and I appreciate all our witnesses being here today. I do have to respond to some of Mr. McGovern's, the ranking member's observations at the start of this hearing. Yes, it is true that I voted in favor of the continuing resolution bill on Saturday. We have such a devastating problem on our southern border in this country. It is just an unbelievable crisis. And only now are other areas in the country waking up to just how dire the situation is in Texas. And my hope is that even this week, we are going to be able to get something moving to provide some help to those states that have been so affected by this massive influx of people who've come in without permission. I knew that during an appropriations lapse, it was going to be impossible to get anything done. That if I wanted increase in border security, that was going to have to come through the federal agencies, and keeping them open was the only rational alternative to take. But Mr. McGovern, before you wax too eloquent on how I've become reasonable in the last week, please don't let me disabuse you of that notion. I am not reasonable, but the only way to get the safety that this country, our citizens, demand and deserve was to keep the federal agencies open so we can deal with this crisis at the southern border. It's just as big a problem as any of the other disasters that we're dealing with in the country right now.
All I said was thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna, again, let me disabuse you.
I won't, I reclaim that. Yeah.
Thank you, that's very helpful to me. If you can refer to me as a MAGA extremist, that would be helpful to me too at home. Mr. Fleischman, I appreciate all your work on this. I always appreciate the attention that you give to making certain that we have the domestically produced uranium that we need in this country to keep our nuclear fleet alive and functioning. One of the things you said in your testimony that actually got my attention was that there was, you minimized the increases to those departments that had unspent, unobligated funds in their ledger. And that's kind of a novel concept for people who think that everything gets spent down to zero every year. There are, in fact, some parts of the Department of Energy that do still have unspent funds from prior appropriations. Is that not correct?
That is absolutely correct, Dr. Burgess, and I'm so glad that you pointed that out. For my colleagues on both sides of the dais, there are literally billions of dollars in some of these accounts to which, if we are making cuts, these are accounts that we are perfectly fine with. These are programs, rather, that we're perfectly fine with, but they have not spent literally billions and billions of dollars. So they've got a backlog in dollars, and in tough fiscal times, we've had to make these decisions. So that's why we were actually able to be a little bit more parsimonious in those areas. Thank you.
And let me just ask a general question. And we've had, in Committee on Energy and Commerce, we've had some oversight hearings into the fiscal management of the agency, and that's where this concept of unspent, unobligated money came from several years ago in an oversight hearing that we had. But really, across the multitude of federal agencies, this is a significant sum of money, to the point that had we encountered an appropriations lapse on Saturday at midnight, it's not that the federal government was suddenly out of money. There, in fact, was significant money. But unfortunately, the president and the cabinet secretaries would be in charge of how the money was spent, and we couldn't trust them to spend the money in a way that would benefit the American people. In fact, they might be hurtful to the American people. Is that not correct?
You're absolutely right. Again, Dr. Burgess, I, like you and many people on the dais, voted yes to keep the government open. A government shutdown at this point in time, I think, would have been very difficult for the border, for the American people, for our troops, and for a plethora of other issues. Having said that, I think you've been very astute and acute in pointing out the fact that the administration, in this case a Democratic administration, would have literally been in control of where to spend and not to spend. And again, I did not want to yield that authority to this administration at that time based on their past performance. So I and you and others, in our view, did protect the American people with that vote to keep the government open as we work in the next 45 days to get to a place where we can come up with a fiscally responsible package that passes hopefully all 12 House appropriation bills.
I thank all of our witnesses for being here today and for your thoughtful testimony. I'll yield back and recognize the ranking member of the Committee on Rules.